You're listening to The Justin Herman Show, where every episode he has conversations with interesting people. Here is your host, Justin Herman.
I'm really excited for this. Jojo connected us, and I know it's taken a little while, which really is more on my end. I'm getting it all figured out, but I really appreciate you making the time.
Absolutely.
So, for those who aren't familiar with you and Bottle Breacher, can you give just a quick overview of who you are and how Bottle Breacher got started in the first place?
Yeah, so a brief overview about me. I'm a 40-year-old male. I am a father, a husband. I'm an entrepreneur, and I have a background in the military, primarily the Navy and the SEAL teams. I did that for about 13 years, and yeah, I'm a pretty patriotic guy. I love my country. I'm also a man of faith. You know, that's a big part of my life and what I'm all about. And yeah, I'm just trying to improve myself and be a good family man and love on my kids and my wife, and I'm trying to make a positive impact in this world that I live in and for this country I love. And so, that's a little bit about me.
You're the third Navy SEAL that we've had on the podcast, and some of them are writers, some of them do leadership stuff, and you're an entrepreneur. But all of the ones we've talked to have all started their, obviously, career in the military. What does it say about the type of people that come out of the SEAL teams and are able to do and have successes in all these different fields?
Well, I think it just shows, the type of individual that they're after. They're not. We in the SEAL teams we call them thinking shooters. You're not after robots. I think that's important that people understand that, because oftentimes, guys from the military can get stereotyped as these like, sir, yes, sir, whatever the order is, like you've got this crew cut and you just follow orders regardless of how ridiculous it is, and you just do what you're told. And I mean, there is discipline. There's a level of, definitely a level of that in the military, but in the SEAL teams, we tend to like guys that can shoot, move and communicate, think for themselves. And we actually have a pretty, a culture of, freedom. And by what I mean by that is like, a lot of conventional military units look at special operators as kind of like cowboys or, kind of like outlaws, guys that, have long hair and, don't really fit the mold. They don't always wear the right uniform, and, that has, I think, some pros and cons that go along with it. But we tend to think outside the box, and we're not really trying to look like everybody else or be like everybody else. We're trying to be very effective at what we do. And I think, I think when you see those types of individuals get out into the private sector, you see their creativity, their ability to build teams, and to most importantly, get the job done regardless of what that looks like.
Did you always see yourself going the Navy SEAL route? Was that a plan from the very beginning, or did you just kind of stumble onto it when you started looking at military options?
Yeah, it wasn't always the plan. As a matter of fact, I grew up in Yuma, Arizona, and we have a Marine Corps air base there. And I grew up, actually looking up to a lot of Marines, and I really liked the culture of the Marine Corps. I really, held those individuals in a very high regard. And as I got older and I started looking more and more into the military and the different options, the research that I did about special operations and the SEAL teams primarily really called to me. And it was, I think, the challenge. Most of the research that I did talked about how the SEAL teams had the hardest military training in the world. And so I really wanted to challenge myself in that way and see if I actually did have what it takes one of my favorite authors, John Eldridge, says that is the number one question that young men and even old men are trying to answer is, do I have what it takes? And that could be, do I have what it takes to be a father? Do I have what it takes to be a husband? Do I have what it takes to be a businessman? And on and on and on. And, so I really wanted to challenge myself, in what I thought would be possibly one of the toughest things that I could do. And right off the bat, I found out that I didn't. And I failed SEAL training the first time. And thankfully, I was resilient enough to actually go out into the fleet, as we call it. I went out onto a ship, and then I had got the opportunity a couple of years later to come back and try again, and I did it, and I made it. So,
wow. Yeah, when I've heard in different people I've talked to who've described SEAL training and just the selection process, obviously it's intense. A lot of people, wash out. They just can't finish it. They quit at some point. What kept you going the second time around when you had already previously didn't make it through? What kept you going through the whole process the second time?
Well, I think it's important that I clarify that the first time I went through, I didn't quit. I actually made it through the hardest part of our training called Hell Week.
Yeah.
Which is pretty close up front in training, and they do that for a reason. They don't want to invest a ton of time and money into you if you don't have the mental fortitude or the mental toughness to be there.
Yeah.
And so I made it through that part, but I wasn't mature. I think I wasn't mature. I was really quick to try and put myself before others. And I think that's a big no-no in that environment. And then also I had kind of trained to the bare minimum. I kind of figured out what the bare minimums were, and then I got my body in a position to where I could do that. And then I kept trying to improve on that. And I also, realized that was also a big no-no there. And, that had been kind of my MO the majority of my life. Hey, just kind of figure out what you got to do, show up, and do it. And in the SEAL teams, they're actually looking for guys that are willing to go much more above and beyond what the minimum standard is. And so there were a few, really big mistakes I made in planning my own entrance into that world that really ended up biting me in the ass. And like I said, I'm fortunate that even the second time when I went back, I knew more and more what they were looking for, but I was able to mature, grow up a little bit, and more importantly, look at how I could put my brothers or the guys that were serving with me, how I could put their needs ahead of mine when things got really bad. And it sounds easy to do. It sounds easy to, when you're writing a card or you're making a speech or something, but when you haven't slept for 4 days, you've been getting your tail kicked the entire time, you're cold, wet, and you're miserable. It's that's when you find out, am I able to put other people's needs before my own? Because at that point, your brain and your thoughts are screaming, hey, you need rest, you need comfort. And what you're supposed to be doing is you're supposed to be able to block that stuff out and look to the guy on your right and look to the guy on your left and be like, how are you doing? What do you need? What can I do for you? Mentality. And that's very, very hard to do. And that was something that the first time that I went, I was not able to do.
How many of those aspects of leadership that you learned along the way have you brought into, your entrepreneurial ventures? I'm going to assume that a lot of them, but, what one specifically would you say, man, I use this every day. I learned this in SEAL school, SEAL training. I use this principle every day when I'm, dealing in my organization.
Right. I think there's so many of them. If I had to just pick one out of thin air, I would probably say a good idea now is better than a great idea later. Right. And you see this a lot. You see this a lot in business. You see this a lot with just people. There are people out there that they really struggle with being able to just go with a good decision now with the information they have, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people get analysis paralysis, and they act like if they don't throw a board meeting before they make every decision, then they might regret the decision that they made, 2 weeks from now and beat themselves up over it. And in SEAL training, they taught us, hey, man, sometimes this information you have, make a decision and go with it. And they're looking to tell us if you're wrong, stay wrong, and just keep moving forward. And so, there were some really just insane lessons that we got into SEAL teams that translated directly into business. And, it's obvious, people say all the time, business is war, and that's why I think so many special operators and especially get out of that world and end up doing really well in business just because of the correlations.
Again, I've talked to other SEALs as well, and sometimes they look at organizational issues, problems in other businesses. So like the ones who've gone the consulting route, and they are able to look at it and quickly discern it, quickly decipher it, and say, hey, we've dealt with things like this in the SEAL teams. Did it surprise you when you got out how many of those things actually would correlate, or was there just an assumption of, the stuff that I'm learning now, these are going to be skills I'll use later in life? Did you see the correlation up front, or was it until you were like living it, you were like, oh my gosh, like this stuff, like this works everywhere?
I could see some of the correlations while I was in, just because, you're still while you're in this, SEAL teams, you're not like quarantined into just military life only. You interact with, your family and also friends and people that that are in the private sector, and they have problems, coming from, and you're able to think about how you would solve those problems. So I could see some of it then, but it really didn't become completely apparent until I got out of the SEAL teams and entered the private sector myself in business, at how many of those lessons actually correlated.
Do you have kids? Do you have a few kids, no kids?
I do. I have 2 kids. I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old daughter, and I had both of them while I was in the military.
Was that hard being away and having kids back at home?
It was actually the biggest reason that I didn't stay, on until retirement. I got out at 13 years, I believe. And, my oldest daughter, she was around, she was born, during 2 of my deployments. I had 2 deployments left after she was born. And so thankfully she was still really young. And so I know she remembers some of it, but not a ton of it. But that was really hard for me, that, that was pretty much before smartphones. And, if I talked to my wife, it was on a sat phone. And, I got tired of watching my daughter grow up in pictures, and that was, so yes, it was extremely hard for me. And then the second one came when I was on, more of a shore duty billet, where I was still in the Navy, still in the SEAL teams, but I was at home. And so, I'm just grateful that almost, the majority of the time, if I'm not traveling, I get to see my kids every day. I take them to school, have dinner with them every night. And yeah, that's a big deal to me.
That's the best. Was it hard did you get married while you were in the SEAL teams, or before or after? Obviously not after you had kids. So where in that did you get married?
So I got married before, right before I left for SEAL training the second time. So right, she's been with me the entire time, which has been pretty cool. That's pretty rare in our community. We have like a 95% divorce rate. So yeah, it's pretty rare to have a wife that survived all that.
That's so great. So you get out of it. You've done probably a bunch of top secret things you can't talk about on here, but still that's pretty cool and pretty awesome. And thank you for all the service you gave to our country. A lot of people don't have the courage to do it. I know I didn't. And you did, along with a lot of other guys, and that is completely badass. Thanks for the freedoms we get to have every day because of the stuff you guys sacrificed for. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
You got out of the teams, and did you know on the front end kind of what you were going to do business, like what you were going to do in general? Like, was it like, all right, what should I do? Do some speaking, do some consulting, just kind of hang out? Did you know that you wanted to go into the entrepreneurial business side from the very beginning, or did you kind of fall into that?
Yeah, I didn't know it from the very beginning. I figured out that I really wanted to pursue entrepreneurship probably when I had about 3 years left in the Navy. I was offered the opportunity to come on board of another startup called Acumen Performance Group and take some of the. It was kind of a consulting training firm that they're still around today, and they just worked with the San Francisco 49ers for like the last 3 or 4 years, and they were on the sidelines during the Super Bowl. I know that they were pretty bummed about that, but they've had some really good success with a lot of sports teams out there taking a lot of the mental and physical lessons that we learned in the SEAL teams and helping apply those to sports teams and corporate groups, and just a bunch of great training. And so I caught the entrepreneurial bug, while I was working with those guys, and I was a part of that startup for about 4 years as a founder, and then when Bottle Breacher kind of came into things, and we really hit it big on Shark Tank, I didn't have time to devote enough of my time and resources to that partnership, and so I had to walk away at that point. But that's where I caught the bug, and what really appealed to me was just the challenge, the fact that you could build something from nothing.
Yeah.
And then also, the upside. Like, I've always been big on upside. Like, what's the ROI of this? Like, because like when you're working a 9-to-5 job, it's like, all right, this is my salary. This is how many days of vacation I get. When you're an entrepreneur, there is none of that. It's like you could make $10 million 1 year. You could go on 3 months of vacation. Sure, your business is gonna, feel the effect of that. But I just love the freedom. I love the potential, and I love, the challenge that went along with it.
So how did you get the idea for the Bottle Breacher? For those who don't know what it looks like, first of all, I'd love you to describe it in your own words. And how did the idea for that came about in the first place?
Yeah, so I got the idea from the Bottle Breacher. My little brother was a Cobra pilot in the Marine Corps. That's like an attack helicopter for your listeners that don't know what that is. And he went to the Philippines, and he brought me back a really generic gift. It was just a real raw 50 cal bottle opener, but I loved it, and I thought it was one of the coolest gifts I'd ever received. And so, a couple of years later, after my buddy saw that thing, and they had beers and used that thing to open, breach open a bottle, and they didn't know where they could buy one, and they asked me, "Hey, where can I get one of these?" And I didn't know. I said, I think that there's an opportunity here to, really take this product that people really respond to and really like. It's not really being made in the U.S., to my knowledge. And I think there's a real potential to grow this and improve it. And so we started working on it. And at the time, my wife had a couple successful small online businesses. And so I asked her if she could help me sell it online. And I started working on perfecting it, making it myself, and then she listed them on Etsy of all places, and that's how we started.
So when it started, the goal was you're just making some cool stuff yourself, because you were doing this while you were doing the other thing, the other consulting thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just
I was not only doing the other consulting thing, but I was a Navy SEAL instructor at the time, so I was teaching. VBSS, which is basically how you take down a ship to West Coast SEALs. And so I had a lot on my plate in addition to 2, children under 4 years old. So
yeah.
we were definitely burning the candles at both ends. And, it was a rough time, but, anybody that's ever exited out of the military, especially without retirement, understands how difficult of a time that is.
Yeah. And so you're making these like what, in your garage or a spare room? Like it's a small operation. You're selling that Etsy. It's a small operation.
Yeah. We were making them out of the 1-car garage. We were actually staying in this base housing in Liberty Station, Point Loma, San Diego. So yeah, it was a really small operation, but it quickly started. I mean, there was just a magic about this product, from the time that we started working on it, on through the run of this thing. And, within, most people don't know this, but, in the first year, we did over $150,000 in sales, just working this thing part-time with a couple, side hustle employees. And then year 2, we were closing in on $900,000, a year. It really jumped up. And that's about the time that we went on Shark Tank. year two, and then the following year we did 5 million in sales, and it just launched into the stratosphere.
Holy
and
gosh!
We've actually done over 20 million in sales with our products, and since we launched this thing, and it's been a blessing, and it's been cool, and just it's been very challenging, and we definitely aren't where we used to be. Like this, the product, kind of had its heyday, I guess you could say. And we're trying to, we're trying to figure out how to, continue to, innovate and create. But once we went on Shark Tank and showed, kind of the world what we were doing, the market really got flooded with, kind of copycats and people that were trying to do the same exact thing. And,
wow.
And it's just capitalism. It's just business. You got to figure it out, and you got to beat those guys. But
do those guys miss the part of you being a Navy SEAL when they decided to start ripping off your idea? Did they miss that? Or I feel like I wouldn't rip off the idea of a Navy SEAL, but it's me personally that not everyone thinks the same way I think, but I just wouldn't do that.
No. Yeah. It's like, and like I said, it's just business.
Yeah.
And, I saw a good opportunity, a good idea, and they were like, hey, let's go do that. And, it's like, it's not, even though sometimes it can be frustrating when you come up with an idea or a service and then somebody starts knocking it off. It's like, you can't take it personal. And I got to remind myself, I didn't come up with the 50 caliber bottle opener myself either. Somebody else did in the Philippines, and that's where I got it from. So it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be right for me to be like, oh, well, I created. No, actually I didn't, because somebody else was doing it in the Philippines before I ever was. So it just is what it is. And you try and make it as cool as you can. You try and separate yourself from other people, and you try and have the best customer service that you can, and then you try and come up with new products, and it's just the cycle of business.
Yeah. Did you reach out to Shark Tank, or did they reach out to you? How did that first work?
We actually reached out to Shark Tank.
And you had to submit a bunch of stuff, and then they finally accepted you, said, yes, come on in. What was that process like?
Yeah, the first time I reached out via email. And I didn't hear anything back. And then I actually went to an open casting call in San Diego near my house. I got to speak to a casting vendor, and then they said, hey, there were a couple thousand people there. They said probably only 1 or 2 of you will get selected to move on to the next round. There's a bunch of rounds in the selection they do, because they get like 40,000 applicants a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I pitched on a Saturday afternoon. They loved it. And then Monday morning at like 7:30, I had an email in my inbox saying, hey, you moved on to the next round. You have 1 week to make a video. And so I made a video, and then they're like, a couple weeks later, they're like, we love the video. We love what you're doing. They're going to sign you a couple producers. They signed Jen and I a couple producers. Every like Friday, I think at like 4:30 p.m., we would have a call with these guys, and they would walk us through the pitch we were working on, and then ask us questions. We would answer questions, and then 5 or 6 weeks later, we were flying out to LA to actually pitch in front of the Sharks.
Now, I find it so, because I watched Shark Tank, and I believe it or not, I actually had another friend who's been on Shark Tank, Handboards, there's like the big like California skateboards, and they, but sometimes there's people on here there who completely bomb, and that sounds like a lot of preparation to like actually get on the show, and then they just kind of bomb. That's surprising to me.
Yeah, if you watch Shark Tank enough, you'll realize that every episode has like 2 winners and 2 losers, and that's by design. Sadly, I think they do that to build suspense. Like, you don't know if everybody got a deal, there'd be no suspense. Like, is this company going to get a deal? But then people also like to see, people fall flat on their face, like with American Idol, with Shark Tank. They love to be like, oh, that was so stupid. Who would ever think that you could get a deal on Shark Tank with just, this silly idea, And so I think they do a great job, creating entertaining, but also educational TV show. And, that's kind of the formula.
And I'm sure there's a link on YouTube, so we'll drop a link to that in the show notes. But give us the quick once over. What was it like being on the show? Who made offers? Did you end up accepting one of the offers? I'm kind of building suspense. Obviously, I know the answer to that, but for our listeners out there, how did it all go?
Yeah, so we were on the show. We were in Shark Tank for about an hour and 20 minutes. Probably see about 8 or 9 minutes of it on TV. We actually got a deal with Mark Cuban and Kevin O'Leary. I think as of last year, we were one of the top 20 selling Shark Tank companies of all time.
Wow.
I think we were number 16 or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we're still in that spot or if we're even in the top 20 anymore. I know that show moves pretty quick, but it's just, it's just a blessing, and people ask all the time. Matter of fact, I had a conference call yesterday with a veteran that was trying to get on the show, and he was asking me, a bunch of these questions, and was it worth it? And I tell people all the time it absolutely was, for many reasons. And it goes along with my whole, mentality that you swing for the fences, you go big in life because you only go around one time. Yeah. And when you look back at the end of your days, you could be one of these guys that was like, well, I didn't accomplish much, but I had a perfect record. I never failed. Or you could be a guy like me that, you've accomplished a few, big things, but you failed a whole lot. And that's how I want to go. That's how I want my story to be at the end of this, that I wasn't afraid to go big. And yeah, I failed a lot, but I learned from those lessons and I applied them to the next attempt.
A lot of people don't learn from their failures and their losses. For some people, it totally cripples them. What sets your mindset differently that you don't let it cripple you when those things happen?
Well, I think a lot of it is mindset and how you look at failure. I think a lot of winners, people that I respect and I try and surround myself with, they're the type of people that see failure as part of the process. And I think a lot of people that either haven't won yet and might never win, I think they see failure as a stop sign or a turn back sign. You've gone too far, right? And so yeah. I think so much of it is just how you look at failure. Do you think it's part of the process? Do you think you're going to get on Shark Tank on the first try? Do you think you're going to become a Navy SEAL on the first try? Do you think the first time you write a book, it's going to, be a success, or do you think it's going to take multiple whacks? And so, and I can't speak for everybody. I can only speak for myself. But for me, I found that, you're almost never going to connect, your first swing. You got to swing several times if you're going to hit one out of the park.
I love that. All right. So you get done with Shark Tank, then you're doing the sales. Sales are going through the roof. Is that when you decide to eliminate some other responsibilities in your life to focus on this? Like, what did the transition look like going from the bottle breacher being one of many things to being the thing?
Yeah. It was, I kind of like to be flexible and flow like water, and I tell people all the time, like I'll tell entrepreneurs a lot that I talk to and maybe mentor a little bit. It's kind of like setting a trap. It's kind of like trying to trap something in the wilderness. If you're trying to trap a rabbit in the wilderness, you don't set one trap. You set multiple traps. And I tell guys getting out of the military and going into the private sector, hey, set a bunch of traps, kind of diversify and get, dabble in a couple different things and then figure out where you're happy, figure out, what you like doing, and figure out where you have, the greatest chance of, trapping that rabbit or in this case, achieving success. And then once you figure that out, then start really focusing in that area. And for me, having a flexible approach to things, I didn't just dabble in one thing when I was getting out. I dabbled in multiple things. And like I said, I even had 2 businesses going at the same time. And the one that was yielding the most fruit was the one that I started really focusing in on and chasing. And so, Mark Cuban is an investor in this business. He said in his book, you follow the green, not the dream. And it's kind of sad, and it can, I think, crush some people's souls. But sometimes in life, you have to follow the green so that you can pursue the mission later, right? And so, sometimes it doesn't matter if you end up, starting a business where you're selling pearly straws, but if that provides for your family, if it pays the bills, you can work on the philanthropy or the mission, a little bit later. But I think sometimes it's the folks that get so front sight focused and so consumed on, hey, it's got to be this, I've got to do that. I think sometimes they miss, a better opportunity right around the corner.
So now it's been going for a while. You said that you're, looking to kind of figure out what the next step is for Bottle Breacher in general. What are you hoping for? Like, if for an entrepreneur, you see the landscape, like, what do you see? What are you anticipating? What are you hoping for the future?
So honestly, we've started another business out of the same facility. It's called Sabino Gifts. It's kind of the sister site. It's kind of like it's a feminine site. It doesn't have the masculine vibe that Bottle Breacher does. And it also doesn't have some of the restrictions, some of the manufacturing restrictions that Bottle Breacher does. So, we've got, a bunch of different products. We can almost sell any product on our sister site, Sabino Gifts. We're just taking prefabricated gifts and we're using all of our equipment to personalize them.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to continue to dabble in entrepreneurship and, continue to work in entrepreneurship because, my feeling about entrepreneurship and the upside and the challenge, that part hasn't really changed. But, I'm starting to transition, more and more, with the things that I'm passionate about, and transition in some other areas. I wrote a book over the last couple of years, and I'm working on getting that published. It's a faith-based book, and I think that's a direction that I want to go in the future, is just trying to make a positive impact for people and in that way.
So when you talk about what's the faith-based book, what is it about? Is it a leadership book, or just about faith and wellness? And where would you kind of categorize it?
So it's more about teaching people how to deal with some of the stuff, some of the pain, some of the adversity they've dealt with in the past, and how to turn that into something positive. And so it's got a really cool, unconventional message to it, and I really hope that it can hit the shelves sometime in the near future.
Now, has faith always been a part of your story from a young age, or is it something that kind of developed over time through SEAL stuff or after SEAL stuff? Like, where did faith intersect your life?
Yeah, faith is something that's, always been a big part of my life, since I was a young boy, and it's gotten more and more, definitely more and more, playing more of a role over time. And so, I've seen a lot of the things that, we fall into. I've seen a lot of the travesties out there, and that, the things that take people out on a daily basis. And, and I've also chased a lot of things that, that the world tells us are going to make us happy, like success and identity and money and all of this other stuff. And I've, come to some conclusions on my own that, none of that, none of it has made me happy. None of it makes most people happy. And so, we're content or fulfilled. And so, really just trying to fight for other people and point other people in the right direction, including myself. That's become really important to me.
Do you do any speaking, like public speaking for youth or for churches or anything like that, like in the faith-based kind of world?
I do, and I have, and I'm looking to do more of it. And that's something that, I'm sure when the time is right, God will open the, necessary doors. But, and until that becomes more and more of an opportunity, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Do you find it hard, having a strong faith when you were going through your military service, or was faith, was there a lot of believers who were around who helped encourage and sharpen that faith? Would it have to be an extra level of intentionality behind keeping your faith strong during that time?
Sometimes it was harder than others. Sometimes you'd be with a group that wasn't, didn't really want anything to do with faith. And sometimes you would be in a group of guys that had a pretty good culture of, faith. It just kind of depended on the time, but it was something that I always, it was always my rock and my foundation, even if I wasn't, living, the most righteous life, it was always something that was really important to me and, was really helpful in my life.
I love that. I absolutely love that. When are you hoping for the book to hit shelves? Like what's your hopeful timeline?
Well, my timeline was my hope was a couple years ago, but like many things in my life, God's plan isn't always Eli's plan. So,
yeah.
I think I've made a breakthrough in the last, 2 or 3 weeks. And I think I've got somebody on board that, can really help me out with this thing. And unfortunately, I don't think I have what it takes all by myself to get this thing over the finish line. And so I'm going to need some help. And, we'll see what happens. I would love to see this thing be finished by the end of the year, but that might be a tall order. So,
yeah. Well, man, it's been so great talking to you. This is going to be, I think, one of the funner episodes because one, it's a product that I use and I have one in my house. I love them. I got them from my friends. But I love getting the backstory of it and kind of a fuller view of who you are. So thank you for making so much time for us.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, man.
I'll talk to you later. Good luck with everything.
Thanks.